Hello, today is Wednesday, January 29th, 2025. Welcome to episode 407 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I am NSI Senior Fellow Bishop Garrison. While illness has brought down my usual co hosts, my colleagues, it has provided me with an opportunity to rise into the host seat today. So I'm joined by NSI Senior Fellow Amy Mitchell, NSI Visiting Fellow Marc and NSI Visiting Fellow Algene Sajiri. Uh, and we are going to jump right into this conversation right now with the big freeze. We're seeing a pause from the federal government, from the Trump administration, on programs abound, a federal funding spending pause as they take an opportunity to look at the totality of government, the whole of government, and understand where money is moving, what exists, and what they believe can be maybe even scaled back with some level of efficiencies. The issue is that over the course of the past couple of days, it seems like it's already been a month, it's been a couple of days, caused a little bit of chaos in terms of understanding what programs can go forward, what programs will be funded. Most recently, we saw some questions on the side of state about programs, with some of those having to be pulled back in terms of the policy for life-saving programs, for programs that provide life-saving care. And also, most recently, with Army contracting, there were some questions about, well, would this affect grants? Will it affect contracts? What's really going on here? So, Marc, let's start off with you. Give us your overall thoughts of the situation and what it's going to look like going forward this week.
Thanks, Bishop. So, in the wider context of the overall guidance that came out of OMB a couple of days ago, it reminds me kind of when I first came to Washington D.C. I started a job at the Pentagon. This huge 17 miles of quarters, 5 stories above ground, a couple below, and they had these rooms called wire rooms, like wire closets. And I remember walking by one and seeing a worker in there, and I said, "How can you possibly keep track of where all those wires go?" And he says, well, I really can't. So what I do is I cut one and I go back to my office and I wait to see who complains, and I know where the wire goes. So what OMB guidance initially did seems to have been the equivalent of walking into the federal government's wire room and cutting all the wires. And then we had the corresponding concerns and complaints that came out of that due to the confusion. I think, it's really important to remember that these federal programs are not restricted to red or blue states. They're all states, and in fact, throughout the world. And the chaos that it created was unfortunately an unforced error. I think they are getting their hand. The administration is starting to get their hands around it. You mentioned that the State Department has issued clarifying guidance. Other agencies have as well. What I would say is, we do have, there are entities within the federal government that know where these mapped out programs go. And, I know there's a focus on reducing the federal workforce, but I think we ought to use the federal workforce that we have to game out these things before we actually cut that wire.
Amy, we're talking about the wire diagram metaphor here. What are your thoughts?
I agree with Marc that, I think that there were probably better ways to implement this change. The Trump administration could have come in and said, hey, we want all agencies by the end of January to report funding streams, give us the contracts, or the grants, and let us review them and kind of figure out that way in terms of the mapping. I think all of us agree that the federal government has become very bloated. And that there was, this change that the American people wanted, where more money is being spent on Americans than overseas. But the problem that this has created, as Marc just mentioned, is this kind of static in the system and this vacuum where, God forbid something should happen. Could the federal government kind of with its hands trying to, get around what's going on internally, be able to respond externally to any threat or perceived threat? And I think that puts us in a very dangerous position right now.
Algene, we'll come back over to you. Algene Sadri, whose name I still butchered, I think. I got it right that time, though, right?
Yes.
Yes. All right. We made it. All right. So, your thoughts here. As we talked about state a little bit and the foreign aid aspects of this. What do you think?
Yeah, I also sit, in addition to being an SI fellow, visiting fellow, I sit on the board of the Global Health Council. Yesterday, we issued a press release about the importance of U.S. foreign assistance programs. They are life-saving. They project American leadership across the globe, moral leadership, as well as, global influence. And they are directly tied to our U.S. national security. Freezing these programs definitely denies life saving interventions. And I don't care if it's for 5 minutes or 90 days. We should never threaten the lives of young children who are reliant on U.S. provided medications, for example, on HIV, for example. We shouldn't threaten basic shelter for displaced people displaced by war in the middle of these programs being administered. It is very confusing to the aid community. It is very destabilizing for the families that benefit from U.S. Moral programs. And quite frankly, if we pull out or if we signal that we are not a strong and reliable partner to these countries and to these programs, then we will see China and our adversaries stepping in to fill in that gap. And that will only hurt our national security and really undermine our global leadership. And so, honestly, this move was a shot in our own foot, and it really is counterproductive to our national security interests.
Yeah, not too many fault lines on this one, folks. We definitely disruption to government can cause problems, even though I think we all think that government reforms it can be productive. That maybe there are other ways about going about it. That's a wrap. Thanks so much to Kelly Crawley, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for their help in producing today's special episode. Join us on Friday, January 31st for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. Fault Lines is now on YouTube, so check out our channel for today's video, for our video of today's episode. If you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe. Thanks.